The air in the mahogany-paneled conference room hung heavy, thick with the scent of old money, polished wood, and barely concealed anticipation. My eldest son, Ethan, a man whose tailored suits and confident smirk were his true uniform, leaned back in his leather chair, a picture of arrogant entitlement. "This session," he announced, his voice echoing with a self-assured authority that grated on my nerves, "is to divide assets. Let's get this over with, shall we?" My hands, though aged and marked by life's quiet battles, remained steady as I reached into my simple leather tote. I pulled out a crisp legal folder, its contents a testament to years of meticulous planning, and slid it across the gleaming table. The silence that followed was absolute, punctuated only by the soft rustle of paper. "You mean," I said, my voice calm, almost serenely detached, "these assets my husband legally transferred to my name last year?" The color drained from their faces as if someone had flicked a switch, leaving them looking like three wax figures melting under an unseen heat lamp. My daughter, Olivia, always so composed, gasped, her perfectly sculpted features contorting into a mask of disbelief. Liam, my youngest, whose eyes usually held a casual boredom, now stared, wide and empty, at the folder. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just sat there, a quiet, unyielding presence, and let the silence fall like a gavel, declaring the game irrevocably over. It's strange, isn't it? A moment of reckoning can feel both triumphant and utterly heartbreaking. Watching my children, my boys, my girl, realize the vast empire they believed was theirs, built piece by painstaking piece by their father, was no longer within their grasp. There was no joy in their shock, no thrill in their humiliation, only a quiet, heavy, exhausted relief earned over decades of being overlooked, of being erased. To understand the full weight of that moment in the grand, intimidating Charleston law office, you'd have to go back to who I used to be, to the woman they had unwittingly helped shape, the woman who, in the end, took it all. My name is Ruby Maxwell, and at 62 years old, I am not merely a widow or a matriarch. I am a survivor, a strategist, and a woman who finally learned to draw her own lines in the sand. I met Arthur Maxwell when I was 22, fresh out of the University of South Carolina. My degree in architectural design, clutched in my hand, felt like a passport to a world I never quite entered. I had dreamed of sketching soaring skyscrapers, of designing homes that breathed, that understood the whispers of sunlight and shadow. My childhood was spent not with dolls, but with blueprints torn from old magazines, imagining how light would fall in a living room or the flow of space in a kitchen. My parents, humble academics, nurtured my creative spirit, believing that a keen mind and an artistic eye were treasures more valuable than any inheritance. I remember spending hours at the local library, poring over books on Frank Lloyd Wright and Mies van der Rohe, sketching my own fantastical structures, envisioning a future where I would leave my mark on the world, one elegant building at a time. Arthur was 10 years my senior, already a force to be reckoned with in the burgeoning real estate market of the South. He was magnetic, charming, a man who walked as if the very ground owed him stability, every step imbued with purpose. He exuded an aura of effortless success, his perfectly coiffed hair and sharp suits speaking volumes before he even uttered a word. He commanded attention, and in those early days, I found myself drawn to his ambition, his vision, his seemingly boundless energy. I fell in love with his mind, strategic, ambitious, constantly churning with grand visions. He spoke of transforming skylines, of creating communities, of leaving a legacy that would echo for generations. And I fell for the way he looked at me, as if I were a complex mystery he had already solved, a beautiful puzzle piece that fit perfectly into his meticulously crafted life. He made me feel seen, admired, and uniquely understood. He'd listen intently to my ideas about design and aesthetics, nodding, even taking notes. "Your eye, Ruby. It's invaluable," he'd say, and I'd glow with the warmth of perceived partnership. We married in under a year, a whirlwind romance that left me breathless and utterly captivated. My mother, bless her practical, worn hands, cried at the wedding. Not out of joy, but from a quiet, pervasive fear. "He's a builder, Ruby," she whispered, holding my face in her hands, her eyes filled with a lifetime of experience. "He'll build an empire. But you, my dear, you'll be the one holding the house up. Mark my words." I didn't understand what she meant then. I was too young, too naive, too swept away by Arthur's dazzling ambition and what I believed was his unwavering affection. I truly thought we were partners, building a life, a future, together. The truth began to reveal itself slowly, subtly, like cracks appearing in a perfectly plastered wall. The first baby came, our strong, willful Ethan, followed by Olivia, a beautiful, precocious little girl, and finally, Liam, our sweet, often overlooked youngest. Each time, I thought motherhood would earn me more visibility in my own home, more voice, more presence in the grand tapestry of Arthur's life. But it only seemed to solidify my role as a quiet fixture. Arthur saw me much like he saw the ever-changing Charleston skyline, something to own, to maintain, to display, not something to consult. He didn't beat me. He didn't cheat on me. He didn't even raise his voice, but he erased me, day by day, like a name on a dry erase board. He made unilateral decisions without me, from changing our son's elite private schools mid-semester without a discussion, to unilaterally planning our lavish summer vacations to the Hamptons or the Mediterranean, announcing dates and itineraries as fate's accomplice. "It's all taken care of, darling," he'd say with a dismissive wave of his hand, effectively shutting down any potential input from me. My opinions, my insights, my very presence in our shared life gradually diminished into a silent, ornamental role. I remember one particular incident early in our marriage, before the children were born. Arthur was developing a boutique hotel downtown, a project I was particularly excited about. I spent weeks sketching out lobby designs, researching local artists, even suggesting a unique, sustainable landscaping plan for the courtyard. I presented my ideas to him one evening, complete with detailed drawings. He nodded, smiled, and said, "Interesting, Ruby. Very interesting." The next week, I saw a local newspaper article detailing the new hotel. It announced his brilliant vision, showcasing renderings of a lobby and courtyard design almost identical to mine, attributed solely to him and his visionary team. When I gently broached the subject, he looked genuinely puzzled. "Darling, it's business. Ideas are fluid. Besides, you just gave me inspiration. I brought it to life." My suggestion, my hard work, had been absorbed into his narrative, my contribution erased. It was a pattern that repeated endlessly throughout our decades together. And my sons, bless their hearts, they learned from him. They learned that power, in their world, came from performance, from outward display of success and control, not from quiet presence or thoughtful consideration. They learned that their mother was a background figure, a woman who packed gourmet lunches for their private schools, smiled politely at charity fundraisers, hosted meticulously planned Thanksgiving dinners, and signed legal documents without reading them because Daddy's got it covered. My attempts to connect with them on their own terms were often met with polite disinterest or casual condescension. When Ethan, in his late teens, became obsessed with American politics and started attending youth leadership camps, I tried to engage. "Ethan, what do you think about the proposed bill on urban development?" I'd ask, genuinely curious, thinking my architectural background might offer a common ground. He'd sigh, "Mom, it's far more complex than that. You wouldn't understand the intricacies of lobbying and campaign finance." He'd then launch into a monologue, never pausing for my input, effectively shutting me out. Olivia, with her keen eye for fashion and social trends, once dismissed my offer to help her choose fabrics for a school project. "Mom, please. Your taste is traditional. This is about being cutting edge." She'd parade through department stores with Arthur's credit card, buying clothes she barely wore, while I quietly managed the household accounts, ensuring her allowance never ran out. Liam, perpetually glued to his devices, barely registered my presence. I'd try to ask about his latest video game or new social media trend, only for him to grunt a non-committal answer, his eyes fixed on his screen, treating me as little more than a service provider. The first time I truly suspected I didn't matter to them, not really, was the Christmas after Arthur's first stroke. He had been recovering, frail but still lucid, and I had poured my heart and soul into making our historic Charleston home feel festive, a sanctuary of warmth and tradition. I had decorated every room, cooked for days, arranged the medical equipment discreetly to keep the ambiance cheerful, even as my own heart ached with worry. Ethan, then 35, arrived 2 hours late, barely offered a greeting, and certainly didn't help unload the car. His first words upon entering the foyer were, "Hey, where's the good scotch, Mom? I had a brutal flight from D.C." Olivia, ever the socialite, spent the entire dinner scrolling through her phone, occasionally pausing to snap a selfie with a strategically placed Christmas ornament, meticulously ensuring her perfect life was documented for her followers. Liam, perpetually glued to his devices, even live-streamed parts of the dinner for his online followers, narrating the boring family holiday to his invisible audience, barely noticing my presence. "Christ with the Queen, Mom," Liam had muttered, catching a glimpse of the pearl necklace I wore, a gift from Arthur, from back when he still pretended my opinions were worth hearing, when he still pretended I had opinions at all. Not one of them thanked me for the feast. Not one of them helped clean up. Not one of them noticed when I slipped into the pantry, tears silently streaming down my face, because the meticulously roasted turkey had gone cold while I waited, with a hollow hope for them to finally sit down at the table, together, as a family. That night, lying in bed beside Arthur, listening to his shallow breaths, I realized I was not just alone, but utterly invisible to the very people I had dedicated my life to. A profound sense of emotional desolation settled over me, chilling me to the bone. Arthur's health continued to decline over the next few years. The strokes came with increasing frequency, each one eroding a piece of his formidable mind, leaving him more confused, more dependent. It was during these long, silent hours, sitting by his bedside, listening to the gentle rhythm of his breathing, that my own awakening began. I was his primary caregiver, managing his nurses, his doctors, his medications, his ever-increasing needs, and I was doing it alone. My children were ghosts, flitting in and out, offering superficial sympathies, always asking about Daddy's papers or the estate. Their concern wasn't for his well-being, but for their inheritance. This period of quiet solitude, ironically, became my forge. Stripped of the distractions of social events and the pretense of a perfect family, I finally had the mental space to confront the reality of my life. I had been complicit in my own erasure, allowing Arthur's dominance to overshadow my own identity. The pain of caring for a man who had systematically diminished me, even in his vulnerability, was a crucible. It hardened my resolve and sharpened my intellect, reminding me of the bright, ambitious woman I had been before Arthur. This was my turning point. My awakening wasn't a sudden flash of insight, but a slow, creeping realization, like a fog lifting. It began one Tuesday afternoon, when I found a stack of old architectural sketches tucked away in a forgotten drawer. My own designs, from before I married Arthur. They were vibrant, daring, full of life. Looking at them, I saw the woman I used to be, the woman I had slowly, painstakingly, buried beneath layers of domesticity and dutiful wifehood. A wave of regret, sharp and bitter, washed over me. But then, a flicker of something else. Determination. I started to pay attention. Really pay attention. Not to the surface-level conversations, but to the nuances of Arthur's vast business empire. I noticed the lawyers who visited, the subtle shifts in his financial statements, the increasingly casual way Ethan, Olivia, and Liam spoke about their future fortune. They believed he was too incapacitated to understand, too frail to resist. They were already circling, like vultures, waiting for the final breath to descend upon their prize. My anger, a slow burn that had simmered for decades, ignited into a fierce, protective flame. Not just for myself, but for the legacy of ethical business Arthur had originally built, before his illness made him vulnerable to manipulation. In a quiet moment, during one of Arthur's rare lucid periods, I spoke to him, not as his wife, but as a peer. "Arthur," I said, holding his hand, his skin papery and thin, "your children, they are already discussing your legacy, not in terms of your achievements, but in terms of their inheritance. And what they're doing behind your back, it's not what you intended for your company." A flicker of pain or perhaps understanding crossed his eyes. His grip tightened slightly, a silent plea, a desperate confirmation. It was then I realized his true intention, unspoken but clear. He had begun the process of legally transferring certain key assets to my name, not just for tax purposes anymore, but to protect me, to secure my future, to ensure his life's work would not be dismantled by his entitled children. He had just run out of time to complete it fully before his final, debilitating stroke. This realization, this silent communication, was my mandate. I would finish what he started, not for revenge, but for justice, and for the preservation of everything he truly valued. I began my clandestine preparations, meticulous and precise. I didn't seek out just any lawyer. I sought a particular kind of legal mind, one known for discretion, for surgical precision, for navigating the labyrinthine world of complex estates and financial forensics. Her name was Amelia Vance. She had a reputation as a quiet dragon, utterly unassuming in her appearance, but with a mind like a steel trap. I found her through an old acquaintance, a former judge who, seeing the despair in my eyes, gave me a single, unblinking recommendation. "Amelia Vance. She'll get it done. No questions asked." Our first meeting was at a small, anonymous coffee shop on the outskirts of Charleston, far from the prying eyes of the city's elite. I laid out my fears, my suspicions, the subtle manipulations I had witnessed from my children. Amelia listened, her expression unreadable, occasionally scribbling notes in a small leather-bound notebook. Her eyes, intelligent and piercing, missed nothing. When I finished, the silence stretched, heavy with unspoken possibilities. "Mrs. Maxwell," she said, her voice surprisingly soft, yet firm. "Your instincts are sharp. Your husband, in his healthier years, was a formidable planner. He built his empire with foresight, not just for profit, but for perpetuity. And it appears, in his final years, despite his decline, he made provisions to protect you, not just superficially, but fundamentally." She explained that Arthur had indeed initiated a series of sophisticated asset transfers into a trust solely in my name, a process that had begun even before his most severe strokes. These weren't just token gestures. They were significant, strategically placed assets, controlling stakes in key properties like the historic Maxwell Tower in downtown Charleston, substantial investment portfolios that served as the company's financial backbone, and even the invaluable intellectual property associated with his signature developments, the architectural blueprints and design innovations that truly defined his legacy. The process was complex, deliberately opaque, designed to withstand scrutiny. It was almost complete, needing only a final series of signatures and filings which, due to his declining health, had been delayed. But Amelia had also found something else, something far more sinister. She uncovered a subtle but growing pattern of financial irregularities committed by Ethan, who, as Arthur's appointed proxy for some business decisions during his illness, had begun to divert funds, inflated construction costs on properties, dubious consulting fees paid to shell companies in offshore accounts, and outright misuse of corporate accounts for lavish personal gain, including funding Ethan's extravagant political campaign events. It wasn't just a desire for inheritance. It was outright fraud, carefully concealed but now glaringly obvious under Amelia's relentless scrutiny. Liam, meanwhile, had quietly accumulated significant personal debt, gambling on volatile crypto investments and high-risk startups, and had begun to discreetly leverage small company assets as collateral, hoping to recoup his losses before anyone noticed. Olivia, while not directly involved in financial malfeasance, had been a willing accomplice, using company funds for exorbitant personal expenses disguised as marketing and PR events. booking luxury villas for business retreats that were purely vacations, and even a new designer wardrobe charged to the company as professional attire. They weren't just entitled, they were actively undermining the very foundation I had helped Arthur build. "It seems, Mrs. Maxwell," Amelia concluded, her gaze firm, "that while your children were busy trying to manage your husband's affairs, they were also systematically dismantling the very empire they believed was their birthright. What your husband started, we can finish, and we can expose their actions, legally and publicly, if necessary." Over the next few months, Amelia and I worked in tandem, often in secret, late-night calls after the house was quiet, or discreet meetings at her downtown firm. She fast-tracked the final asset transfers, leveraging Arthur's meticulously drafted trust documents and his previously unfiled intentions. We built an unassailable legal fortress around the assets meant for me, securing them against any future challenges. Simultaneously, she compiled an ironclad case detailing Ethan and Liam's fraudulent activities and Olivia's complicity in the misuse of company funds. It was a painstaking, emotionally draining process, but each step solidified my resolve. I wasn't just protecting myself, I was protecting Arthur's true legacy, ensuring his life's work would not be defined by his children's greed. This quiet, determined work was the most intellectually stimulating period I had experienced in decades, a stark contrast to the hollow social life I had been living. I felt my old self re-emerging, piece by piece, sharper and more resilient than ever. Arthur passed peacefully in his sleep, a quiet end to a tumultuous life. The immediate aftermath was a blur of hushed condolences, strained family gatherings, and the ever-present, suffocating scent of lilies. My children, Ethan, Olivia, and Liam, descended upon the family estate like a flock of birds of prey, their grief overshadowed by a palpable impatience for the reading of the will. Their conversations, supposedly private, often drifted within earshot. "Mother, honestly, what does she even know about business?" Ethan scoffed to Olivia one afternoon, as I overheard from the sunroom, supposedly napping. "Dad handled everything. She just existed. This is about us, about Dad's real legacy. She's had her time. She just needs to sign the papers and let us handle it." His voice dripped with condescension, a casual dismissal of my entire life. "Exactly," Olivia chimed in. "She's been so frail, so emotional. She'll probably just sign whatever we put in front of her. She's grieving. It's our responsibility now to pick up the pieces and the money. We can finally modernize things, bring the brand into the 21st century." "She wouldn't understand." Liam just nodded, too busy scrolling on his phone to offer a profound thought, but his knowing smirk conveyed his agreement. I remained outwardly calm, my demeanor subdued, just as they expected. I played the part of the grieving widow, the gentle matriarch, reinforcing their underestimation of me. But beneath that quiet facade, a steel resolve had formed. Each dismissive comment, each greedy whisper sharpened my focus. They thought I was a blank slate, a quiet backdrop to their grand inheritance. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The day of the will reading dawned clear and crisp, a deceptive beauty that belied the storm brewing within. We gathered at the prestigious law offices of Sterling and Finch, located in a grand, historic building in downtown Charleston. The building itself, a testament to old Southern wealth, seemed to hum with suppressed anticipation. The room itself was imposing. High ceilings, heavy velvet drapes, and a massive mahogany table that seemed to absorb all light and sound. The air was thick with the scent of old leather, and a faint, metallic tang of tension. Arthur's longtime attorney, Mr. Richard Finch, a man known for his meticulous adherence to protocol, sat at the head, his face a neutral mask of professional solemnity. Across from me sat Ethan, Olivia, and Liam, arrayed in their finest, their faces radiating a smug, barely contained confidence. Beside me, Amelia Vance, quiet and unassuming in a perfectly tailored dark suit, was a silent sentinel of my impending triumph. Her presence seemed to subtly annoy my children, as if her mere existence was an affront to their perceived authority. Mr. Finch cleared his throat, adjusting his spectacles. "We are gathered here today to read the last will and testament of Arthur Maxwell," he began, his voice dry and formal, listing Arthur's vast array of assets, the prime real estate holdings stretching from Charleston to Atlanta, the thriving investment portfolios, the sprawling family estates including the historic Charleston Manor, the extensive art collections, the fleet of luxury cars, and even the private jet. My children fidgeted, their excitement barely contained, their eyes gleaming with avarice. Ethan even leaned forward, a triumphant smirk playing on his lips, as if waiting for his cue to take over. Olivia, with a discreet movement, pulled out a small mirror and checked her lipstick, a nervous habit that betrayed her eagerness. "And now, for the distribution of these assets," Mr. Finch continued, his gaze sweeping across the room. Ethan cleared his throat, preparing to interrupt, to confirm his position as primary heir, already envisioning his new life as the undisputed head of the Maxwell empire. Before Mr. Finch could utter another word, I acted. With deliberate slowness, I reached into my tote, pulling out not one, but a stack of legal folders. They were thinner, crisper, newer than the hefty will Mr. Finch held, yet their contents held infinitely more power. I slid the top folder, emblazoned with Amelia's firm's logo, across the table to Mr. Finch, another to each of my children, and kept one for myself. The soft scrape of paper against polished wood was the loudest sound in the room. "Before we proceed with the, distribution of assets, Mr. Finch," I interjected, my voice calm and clear, cutting through the heavy silence like a diamond on glass. "I believe there are a few recent transfers of which you may not be fully aware. My husband, Arthur, worked tirelessly with my attorney, Miss Amelia Vance, to ensure his final wishes were accurately reflected well before his passing." Ethan's smirk vanished. Olivia's carefully composed face tightened. Liam, for once, looked up from his phone, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes, as if a quiet alarm had just sounded in his complacent world. Amelia Vance, until now a silent shadow, spoke, her voice precise and authoritative, carrying a hidden weight. "Indeed. Over the past year, Mr. Maxwell, with Mrs. Maxwell acting as his legal proxy, executed a series of irrevocable trust transfers. These transfers systematically moved the majority of his liquid assets, his controlling interests in the Maxwell Real Estate Group, and all associated intellectual property and key land holdings into a trust solely managed by Mrs. Ruby Maxwell. These transactions were legally sound, fully documented, and completed several months before Mr. Maxwell's passing. The intent was clear: to consolidate his most significant legacy directly under Mrs. Maxwell's stewardship, ensuring its long-term stability and ethical management. As Amelia spoke, I watched my children's faces. The color drained from them not gradually but in an instant, leaving them ghostly pale. Ethan's jaw dropped, a picture of stunned disbelief. Olivia's eyes, usually so calculating, widened with raw panic, her hand flying to her mouth. Liam, for the first time in years, looked genuinely afraid, his bravado utterly deflated. It was like watching three wax figures melt in real time, their carefully constructed facades dissolving into a puddle of shock and horror. You what?" Ethan finally stammered, his voice hoarse, disbelief warring with a dawning fury. He slapped the folder I'd given him, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "This is impossible. Dad would never. This is illegal. It's a forgery." He sprang to his feet, knocking his chair over with a clatter. "Forgery?" Amelia retorted, her tone unwavering, her eyes pinning Ethan like an insect. "Mr. Maxwell, every document is notarized, every transfer meticulously recorded by the state. This was your father's explicit, legally sound intent, executed over a period of months. What is illegal, however, are the actions detailed in the supplementary report on your table, the fraudulent expense reports, the systematic diversion of corporate funds for personal use, the unauthorized leveraging of company assets for your reckless personal investments, and your sister's egregious misuse of company accounts, all committed during your father's incapacitation." These are not merely breaches of fiduciary duty, but actions that border on criminal fraud, which Maxwell is prepared to present to the relevant authorities, starting with the Attorney General's office. She gestured to the second set of documents in their folders, the meticulously compiled evidence of their misdeeds, each page a damning indictment of their avarice. Ethan stared at the report, his face turning a sickly shade of green. Liam, seeing the detailed records of his crypto losses and unauthorized collateral, visibly trembled, his phone, usually a lifeline, now useless in his shaking hand. Olivia, for once, was speechless. Her carefully cultivated composure shattered, tears of rage and humiliation welling in her eyes, smearing her expensive makeup. "No, no, this isn't right," Olivia shrieked, finally finding her voice. "This is our inheritance. It's what we deserve. You can't do this, Mom. This is about family. Our family. Dad would never cut us out completely." "Precisely, Olivia," I said, my voice calm, almost gentle, yet infused with an ironclad resolve. "This is about family, about the values Arthur and I truly upheld. Integrity, responsibility, and hard work. Values that you three seemed to conveniently forget in your pursuit of easy wealth. The empire your father built, its true essence, its soul, it was never just about money. It was about purpose, about ethical stewardship. And that, my dear, cannot be stolen or squandered by greed. It belongs to me now, to be managed responsibly, as Arthur intended. The truth, in this room, is that you left yourselves out of Arthur's true legacy, not me." The silence that followed was absolute, filled only with the ragged breathing of my children. Mr. Finch, though clearly stunned, nodded slowly, acknowledging the legal reality laid bare before him. Within minutes, the board members, some of whom had been loyal to Arthur for decades, and who had witnessed the children's increasingly erratic and self-serving behavior, sided with me. Ethan, Olivia, and Liam were immediately suspended from any roles within the Maxwell Real Estate Group, pending a full internal and external investigation into their financial misconduct. Their future vision had dissolved into a nightmare of their own making. The betrayal they had inflicted had, with a quiet, decisive twist, come back to consume them. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of intense legal proceedings, exhaustive forensic audits, and a brutal public reckoning. The news, when it broke, was a sensational headline in the Charleston business papers. Maxwell dynasty rocked by family feud. Widow alleges fraud against own children. Heirs under investigation. It was a public spectacle, humiliating for Ethan, Olivia, and Liam. Their names dragged through the mud, their carefully constructed social standing crumbling around them. But for me, it was strangely liberating. The painful, ugly truth was finally out, cleansed by the harsh light of public scrutiny. The fallout was catastrophic for them. Ethan's burgeoning political career imploded, his name synonymous with financial scandal. His investment accounts, already depleted by poor choices, were frozen as the federal investigation into his fraudulent activities began in earnest, threatening him with not just financial ruin but severe criminal charges that could send him to prison. Olivia's meticulously curated social media empire, built on a shaky foundation of inherited wealth and manufactured glamour, disintegrated overnight. Her lucrative brand sponsorships evaporated, her followers dwindled, and her lavish lifestyle, so dependent on easy access to Arthur's funds, vanished as her assets were frozen. Liam, drowning in debt from his failed ventures, disappeared from public view, rumors swirling of bankruptcy and desperate attempts to flee his creditors. Their grand, modern mansions and their exclusive Charleston enclaves, once symbols of their perceived success, became gilded cages, monuments to their unchecked greed and ultimate downfall. The quiet dignity of their suburban pretense was shattered. My relationship with Ethan, Olivia, and Liam, once strained by their arrogance, now fractured completely. They were consumed by their own legal and financial troubles, their bitterness, a tangible barrier between us. There were no apologies, no attempts at reconciliation. They chose to blame me for their downfall, rather than acknowledge their own avarice and the devastating consequences of their actions. The pain of family estrangement was profound, a wound that might never fully heal. There are days when the ache of that loss is almost unbearable, a constant reminder of the dreams I once held for a united, loving family. But beneath it, a quiet peace settled. I had drawn a line in the sand, protected my husband's true legacy, and refused to be exploited. I had honored Arthur's memory, not by letting his wealth be squandered, but by ensuring it would continue to build, to create, to do good. I restructured the Maxwell Real Estate Group, streamlining operations and focusing on sustainable, ethical development projects that Arthur would have truly championed. We diversified into eco-friendly commercial spaces and affordable, well-designed residential communities, a nod to my own forgotten architectural aspirations. The company, now leaner, more ethical, and fiercely managed, began to thrive again, its reputation for quality and integrity shining brighter than ever. I established the Arthur Maxwell Legacy Foundation, an organization dedicated to providing affordable housing solutions and supporting young entrepreneurs in underserved communities, causes that truly reflected Arthur's initial vision. Before the corrupting influence of unchecked wealth took hold, the foundation quickly gained national recognition, attracting passionate individuals who believed in its mission. I also started an internship program for aspiring developers and architects from diverse backgrounds, teaching them not just the principles of sound business, but the discipline of ethical practice, the value of integrity, and the enduring power of perseverance. I saw potential in every young person who walked through our doors, a spark that reminded me of my younger self and of Arthur's belief in the untapped potential of everyone, regardless of their background. My grandniece, Clara, a brilliant and compassionate law student, has recently started interning with Amelia Vance's firm, showing a keen interest in ethical estate planning and corporate governance. I see a glimmer of hope for a different kind of legacy in her, one built on service and integrity, a stark contrast to the destructive paths my own children chose. Sometimes, the quiet ones, the ones underestimated and dismissed, are the very ones who hold the key to the truth. The ones who deliver the most profound lessons. My Arthur, in his quiet wisdom, had seen that in me. He had taught me not just to survive, but to thrive, to foresee the unseen, and to fight for what I believed in. He left me not just the memory of his love, but the strength to protect my own legacy. And in his passing, he showed me, and the world, who I truly was, not just a grieving widow, but a formidable entrepreneur, a resilient survivor, a woman who refused to be written out of her own story. This story isn't just about a company, or a family feud, or the pursuit of wealth. It's about perception and reality, about the unseen battles fought in the quiet corners of lives, and about the unexpected power that lies within us when we choose to stand up for what's right. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or betrayed, remember that your quiet strength can be your most powerful weapon. Your integrity is your shield, and your truth, when revealed, can shatter the most carefully constructed deceptions. What you do in silence, the preparation, the observation, the unwavering commitment to your values, often speaks louder than any public declaration, echoing through time and leaving an indelible mark. I was once invisible, a silent fixture in my own home. But when they tried to erase me from my husband's legacy, I found my voice. The empire they thought was theirs had a hidden queen, and she wasn't about to be silenced. What will you do when they underestimate you?